Resident Evil 4 is a pivotal point in the Resident Evil series that had the series go into a different direction, with it being more of an action horror game than a survival horror. This change turned out to be very revolutionary for the gaming industry, with it having the over-the-shoulder camera and shooting and melee attacks. Now, this was a very questionable change for the franchise, but it turned out to be one of the best things they did, seeing that RE4 is regarded as one of the best games in the Resident Evil franchise, and it's also looked as one of the best games in general. Now, most fans that played RE4 like, but you also have fans that hate that RE4 started the shift in the franchise from survival horror to action horror. To me, I was never really bothered by the change in the formula because sometimes change can be a good thing. Resident Evil 4 isn't one of my favorite games of all time, but it's still a game that I've played a lot of different times on all the different versions that you have, either the Wii version, GameCube version, PS2 version, which we all know is trash, and of course the PS4 version. And it's a game that I've had a lot of fun with and I've enjoyed every single time that I play it. So I'm not going to talk about the development in this video because everybody and their mama has already talked about it, you know, like Devil May Cry, Hunting Ground, all of that, 3.5, everybody's already talked about that. But I just want to talk about RE4 in general and my experience with the game, what I like about it, the story, everything in general. But with that out the way, let's talk about Resident Evil 4. One of the things I always find interesting about RE4 is when it comes to the Plaga, they will remind you of Parasite, because if you've ever read the Parasite manga or seen the anime, the way the parasites look in RE4, they look vastly similar to the way they look in the Parasite manga and anime, and they're very similar. So to me, it does seem like RE4 most definitely had to take some inspiration from the manga, because you know the manga came out back in 1988, so they had to most definitely take some inspiration in some type of way, or it's just a coincidence, but they look very similar, because when you shoot a villager or a soldier's head off and the Plaga comes out, it looks very similar to the way that the parasites look in the Parasite manga, especially when it comes to the scythe-like appendage. They literally look the same and they act the same, because in Parasite they use that as a weapon to defend themselves, and that's the same thing that the Plaga use in RE4. So there's a lot of similarities. And if you go with the cultists and like the Plaga that pops out of them, and you have like that big thing that kind of wants to eat you, that will also remind you of the Parasite manga, mainly because you know when it comes to the parasites in there, what do? They want to bite people's bodies off and bite their heads. So it's very similar, because to me it's too big of a coincidence, especially when you compare them. They do look similar and they kind of do act similar in a way, but I mean at the same time, they're both parasites and we know how parasites work in real life, so that's probably what they took the inspiration from. But RE4 most definitely had to take a little bit of inspiration from the Parasite manga. Now I want to talk about the story of RE4, because the story of RE4 is really interesting, because this is kind of the first time in the franchise where you don't really have a connection to Umbrella like that throughout this game, mainly because RE4 is kind of isolated, like in between like all the other games, besides of course having Leon, Ada, and Wesker. Like those are the real only connections that you really have for Umbrella, because RE4 kind of just feels like its own standalone game, because one, it takes place in an isolated village in Spain, because like the whole plot and then like even Sadler and all that, it just feels so vastly different than like what we're used to when it comes to all the Resident Evil, because you know usually you're thinking like Umbrella and all that, but this time it is not Umbrella at all. But let's talk about the story of Resident Evil 4. So when it comes to the story of RE4, it's kind of like a very wacky-ish story, especially when you look at the dialogue, because a lot of the dialogue in RE4, some of it's cheesy, some of it's corny, but a lot of it is kind of still funny, because there is some really funny dialogue that you get throughout the story, especially when it comes to Leon's interaction with all the different characters. Like when it comes to like the video calls, there's a lot of funny moments between Leon and Sadler, and of course like Leon and Salazar, because like there's a lot of funny moments, and that's one of the things I really like. But when it comes to the story, it is a very interesting story. Yes, there are some holes in the story that are very questionable, especially when you look at the Leon and Ada's interaction when they first meet, because Leon's talking about, oh, you're working with Wesker now, instead of like, yo, this is the first time I've seen you in a long time. So like you have little moments like that that are kind of just like questionable. And then like when it comes to the Wheeze, his whole role in the story, it kind of just feels very short, because you barely really know him in the story. You just know this guy that you meet here who's also running away from this cult, and yeah, he helps you a little bit throughout the story, but like you don't really get much of that. And then next you know, he just dies. And like the thing is, you don't really have time to really feel sad for him because he dies so fast, and most of the time he was just saying a whole bunch of like sleazy type of stuff in the story, so like you don't really have much time to really connect with him, because like his time is very short in the story. Now when it comes to Ada's whole role in the story, it makes sense that she would be here, because one, she's a spy, she's working for Wesker, but we also see that she has her own motives, especially when it comes to Leon, because like throughout the whole story, Wesker's like, dog, you need to pack up Leon. She's like, nah, I would do it my own way, and that's how Ada is throughout the whole story. We'll talk about Separate Ways later, because I feel a certain way about Separate Ways. But overall, I really enjoy the story, and if you compare it to like some of the past stories, this is one of the more better stories that we actually have, like from start to finish, because one, we get to see a more polished Leon, because this is not the rookie Leon that we saw in Raccoon City. This is a Leon that's been through some shit, and we know that he's been through training, and we know know that he's been through things, especially like when it comes to Krauser, because we learned about Krauser, like how Leon and Krauser have this old connection, and like how Leon kind of just thought that Krauser was dead, or just like how he went missing. So like you had that connection there, and you can see they have some type of past because Krauser used to train Leon, and you see like their interactions throughout the story where Krauser is always just acting like he's kind of more superior than Leon because like, you know, he trained him. And when it comes to Sadler and his whole overall plan, there are multiple times in the story where I'm just like, dog, you could have stopped Leon and then your plans would have never been foiled, but instead he does. There's the whole scene like when he's inside the church. It's like, dog, you could have transformed into your final form in that church and took out Leon right then and there, because at that moment you don't even have all your weapons, and like Leon would have not been able to stop Sadler at that moment. There's a lot of moments in the story if like Sadler would have went all out, he actually could have, you know, stopped Leon, but like he actually didn't, and until like basically like all the people under him were dead. So then at that point he had to do it himself. When you actually think about the story of RE4, it actually is really sad when you look at it from the villagers' perspective, because they took this parasite inside of their body because their leaders telling them to do this, and then they just become mindless slaves because the parasites control them. And even when you get to the end of RE4, it's not like the whole little village in Spain blows up, it's just the island that blows up. So the castle and the village are still there. So whatever individuals are still alive there, they never get blown up. And like there's nowhere in the series that explains that like this village gets destroyed. Like there's no bombs, there's nothing sent. At least when it comes to Raccoon City, we know that a bomb was dropped there, even though, you know, in RE9 we're going back there to Raccoon City. But that's something I do think about when it comes to the villagers and then like the cultists that were still alive in the castle and in the village, because Leon most definitely did not kill everybody. There has to be some individuals that are still alive. I think the only thing we really know when it comes to the lore of like this whole village and all that is that like it was fenced off and all that, and people can't go to this village, but they never took care of like all the villagers and like the cult members that were still alive that didn't get killed by Leon. So that's kind of one of the sad parts about this, is that they never got put out of their misery, at least the ones that were still alive that weren't killed by Leon or Ada. Now I want to talk about the combat, because the combat is one of the standouts of this game, and that's what this game is mainly known for, just because of how fun and addicting the combat is, and especially the gameplay loop. The gameplay loop is so fun. One of my favorite things to do in this game is use the snipers. The snipers are so fun because the headshot sound it makes with the sniper is so satisfying, and like the loop between that as you're just shooting enemies and taking them out with the sniper is phenomenal. That's one of my favorite things. And this game brought us the over-the-shoulder camera, which was very revolutionary for the gaming industry. Now this game does have a lot of quick time events, and sometimes those can be very irritating, mainly because like if you're not paying attention or if you're not clicking the right buttons, you're gonna die or you're gonna mess something up, and they can become very irritating. This game just has a lot of them. To me, there's kind of way too much quick time events. That's kind of the downside of RE4 in my opinion, is there's way too goddamn many quick time events. But like it's not really too bad, but at the same time there is way too many goddamn many quick time events. And of course, like when it comes to the guns, all the guns have laser sights, which is very helpful, especially like as you're transitioning, because you know in Resident Evil 4 you have to aim to shoot, where you know in all the other games they had lock on. This game doesn't really have lock on, so you have to aim to shoot. So having the laser sight does help out, especially because it was a good little transition between, you know, having aim assist and then being able to aim yourself because you have to shoot. And also one of the things this game introduces is melee, and the melee is fun because you can kick people, you can suplex them, which is kind of crazy because Leon will suplex certain enemies, and most of the time when you do that it takes out the enemy. So that's one of the fun things you can do, is like when it comes to the melee. Yes, it's very simple melee, like it's not nothing super advanced, something like either RE5 or RE6, because those ones go more in detail, and especially like the Revelation series go more in detail when it comes to the melee, where this one is just super simple. You have your few things that you can do, but it is fun to do, especially like when you're surrounded by a whole bunch of enemies and you stun one enemy and you just kick him, and then next thing you know it kicks all the other enemies that are right by it. So it's something fun to do. Two of the things that this game introduces is, one, instead of having an item box, you actually just have like this big case that Leon carries around, and in there you can put like all your different weapons. And one of the cool things about it is that you can organize it, and that's one of the fun things to do in this game, is just organize like all your different items, because like you're gonna have your health there, you're gonna have your bullets, and then you're gonna have your weapons, and you have to organize it the right way or you're gonna run out of space. And when you run out of space, there's usually like a thing on the side there where you can put some of your stuff at, and then you just have to reorganize it to see if you can fit all these items. As you go throughout the game, you're able to upgrade this case and make it bigger and bigger until like it's finally like the extra large size. And then when you're at the extra large size, size. You can fit a lot of different things in there, and most of the time you're not going to run out of space unless you have too many weapons in there, or if you just have a whole bunch of ammo or health, because you might have a whole bunch of health, because that was one of the things I kind of ran into, is that I had a whole bunch of health. Now, one of the other final things this game introduces is the treasure system, because in this game you can find a lot of different treasures that you can sell to the merchant, because the merchant is also introduced in this game, and the merchant is like who you go to upgrade your weapons or buy new weapons. And like how you get all this money is like when you kill enemies, you get money, or if you destroy boxes that are all boxes or crate that are spread out through like the whole game, and sometimes that can have ammo or money in it, but then you take it to the merchant, and then when you go to the merchant, that's how you can just get all these different weapons and all these different upgrades. Because one of the things about the guns is the guns can be upgraded, but like once you upgrade these weapons all the way to the max, the weapons kind of become broken, because you can just take out enemies pretty easily. Yes, you're still going to have enemies that are going to get up, but at the same time, some of these enemies get taken out way faster than they would if you didn't have these weapons upgraded. And then when it comes to the treasure system, some of these treasures can connect to other things. Like you have a crown and you have to look for some jewels that can go in this crown. You have a mask and this mask has different jewels that can go in there. So that's one of the cool things about the treasure system, is that you got to make sure some of these items like don't go with other things before you sell them, because you don't want to sell this jewel if it just happens to connect to this other treasure. That's why you don't want to sell them. And also, a lot of treasures are hidden, but when they're hidden, you can usually just like look up and you see something sparkling and then you just shoot it down. And also you can buy treasure maps from the merchant where it'll show you where all these items are at. That way you can go get them. That way you can like have money to go to the merchant. Now, when it comes to the weapons in this game, there's a lot of variety to them, especially when it comes to the pistols, because there's a lot of different pistols you can get, and you can choose and see which one is your favorite. When it comes to the shotgun, there's like a few different options to get for the shotgun. Of course, when it comes to the sniper, I'm pretty sure there's only 2 different snipers you can get. And then when it comes to the machine gun, you really only have 2 options, the TMP, and then like you have the Chicago typewriter, which is something you unlock later on. And then also you have the Magnum, but you get 3 options. One you have to unlock later on, but the other 2 you find throughout the story. And then the final thing you have is a rocket launcher, because one of the cool things this game does is when it comes to the rocket launcher is that you can buy a rocket launcher from the merchant. Like before you go to any type of boss fight, you can go buy it from the merchant. That way you can take out the bosses, because the bosses in this game, of course, they get all one shot with the rocket launcher, and that's one of the cool things you can do in this game. And also you are given a rocket launcher for free in the game, like when you're in the castle. But yeah, I've really liked the weapon variety in this game, because you get a lot of different options to choose which ones are your favorite and which ones you want to upgrade, because you get all these different weapons throughout like the whole story, because you find them like in certain locations, and then you can choose which one do I want to use for this playthrough, or which one do I really enjoy. And that way when you go to the next playthrough, you can use some of your favorite weapons in that playthrough. Now, one of the other mechanics I forgot to mention earlier is that you have to escort Ashley. And just know this, some people find this very annoying, mainly because like Ashley always screaming, "Help me, Leon, help me," and it can become very annoying like as you're playing. But the thing is, if you know what you're doing with Ashley, it doesn't become annoying, especially like if you have places where you can hide Ashley. If you have her hide, you don't got to deal with her being taken away, or if you're just actually being on top of just taking out these enemies. There is the water room. The water room is notorious for like kind of like some BS coming when it comes to Ashley, especially because you can accidentally kill Ashley, and that can be very annoying, especially like if she's standing in the wrong area and she just happens to like duck down, but then she ducks back up and then you just shoot her on accident as you're trying to shoot another enemy. That can be annoying. But there is one thing this game does to kind of like fix that, but that's after your first playthrough. One of the additional costumes that Ashley gets in this game is a suit of armor, and when she has the suit of armor, she's essentially invincible, and like no enemies can really pick her up, because when they go to pick her up, they basically fall because she's super heavy. And also there's a lot of funny things that happen with this, because like when you have to like catch her with Leon ends up catching her, but after he puts her down, he ends up like putting his hand on his back, because one, she's super heavy and it looks like he got hurt from catching her. And that's like one of the funny things like when it comes to that. But to me, Ashley was never really annoying in this game, but I know a lot of people found Ashley annoying, or there's just like a group of the fandom that don't like Ashley in this game, and it's like she's not even that bad if you actually know what you're doing with her. Yes, the "help me, Leon" can sometimes be annoying, but for the most part, to me, it was not really that bad. Now, this game has a lot of variety when it comes to the enemies, and some of the enemies can be very annoying. Like you have the villagers, you have the people on the island that can be annoying, you have the Chainsaw Man or Dr. Salvador, or you have the Chainsaw Sisters, which can sometimes be annoying if you don't actually take them out, because they can be challenging to kill. And you have the Novistadors, which are the bugs that can turn invisible, and those ones are actually really cool. I really like their enemy type, mainly because they can turn invisible, and also they're like these crazy bugs, and especially like if they attack you, they essentially leak out this acid, acid and it can burn your face if you allow it to happen for too long. So they're pretty cool enemies and I like them a lot. And also they can be annoying to kill, but they're not really that annoying because like if you actually go to certain areas, you can just like kill them pretty easily. It's just sometimes they can be annoying when it's like a lot of them and like they're turning invisible and they're attacking you. Sometimes it can be annoying, but at the same time, it's not really that bad in my opinion. And of course, when you're in the castle, you have the cult members, and the cult members, they sometimes can suck, especially when there's a lot of them and they just and they're shooting at you, especially when they're shooting arrows at you. I hate that when they're shooting arrows because like there's always one somewhere randomly that's shooting your arrow and you're just like, dog, who is shooting me? Now the Gyarados is a very interesting enemy because like, you know, it's blind, but it's essentially like kind of Wolverine because it has the long ass claws, and since it's blind, if you make any noise it's gonna run after you. But like once you get past like the first shock of like, oh, this enemy is very terrifying, you can take them out pretty easily. But they are a really cool design when it comes to the enemies. Probably one of the coolest enemies in the game. Now the next enemy I want to talk about are the Regenerators and the Iron Maiden, since they are the same thing. It's just the Iron Maiden has like all the spikes and all that, and they are terrifying because you have to use a special scope to see like where you have to kill them, because you know they have parasites on their body in certain spots and they can be terrifying, especially like when you first do a first playthrough of this game. They're very terrifying because you're just like, dog, I need to hurry up and kill this thing because before it gets close to me. And it's like when you finally do like another playthrough, they're not really that scary, especially like them or the Iron Maiden. You can usually handle them because they usually don't walk that fast, so like you can take them out. But they are very terrifying, and they are a very terrifying enemy in general because they can regenerate, and like that's vastly different than all these other enemies we've been dealing with. You're just like, oh shit, this shit can regenerate. Now the last enemy I want to talk about is the Gatling gun guy, and he's the most annoying enemy in this game, mainly because he has a Gatling gun, and sometimes it can be annoying, especially if you run in his line of fire, and next thing you know you're getting stunned and you can't even go into your inventory to like grab some health, especially like if you get there and he's shooting at the beginning. It's like, dog, you know you're about to be dead. So like he's very annoying. Now I want to talk about some of the locations in the game that we visit, because we have three main locations that you have when it comes to the areas you have to be in. You have the village, the castle, and the island. I want to start with the village because the village has a very amazing opening scene to start the game, because like you have Leon showing up here, and the people that he showed up with, they both get packed up. When Leon arrives in his village, he can tell the village something's off with the village, and you get there, and once they find you, they all start attacking you, and then you have to hide in that house, and then you have this big fight with them. Then you have the chainsaw man, and that's when the bell rings, when Leon's like, of course, says a line.
Where's everyone going? Bingo?
And like that's a really great opening scene because it just lets you know like how this game is going to be and how intense it is. But as you go throughout this village, you get to go to a lot of different areas. You have different puzzles that you have to do. You have a puzzle when it comes to the church, and then that one's like the one with the lights, and that one's not really that hard because you just got to look at it. And you have that whole puzzle with the ball that's at the chief's mansion. You have that one. So like you have little puzzles that you have to do, but it's not really nothing crazy compared to some of the other games. They're pretty easy puzzles, but you have a lot of different areas that you go through like as you go through the village, and you just explore like what it is. Now one of my favorite areas in the village is like the two paths, because I thought that was really interesting that you just had like the two paths you had to go through. One path you have to fight the chainsaw sister, the other path you have to fight the big old giant thing. So that was like one of the areas I liked. Yeah, you do have the whole area where you have to fight like a big horde of enemies with you and Louise, and in general that one's not really that bad compared to some other games that have hordes that come and attack you like when you're inside like a house or a building or something. This one was actually not that bad, and it is very enjoyable, so that's one of the ones I do like. But overall the village is a really good starting area because we get to see like kind of how these individuals lived before, of course, you know, they had them parasites put inside them. We see that they live in a small village where it's like mainly a farming village, and also you of course like they have like the whole fishing farm, and you have that area that they go to too. And along with religion being a big part of their society, seeing that they have the church and that every individual goes to his church, and you even saw like when the bell was ringed, where did they go? They went to the church because that's something that usually happened in their village, and that's probably like one of the small things they still had, is that they realized whenever the bell is ringed that we go to church. And of course like when it comes to the chief was the pastor of this village, so you just see like the whole connection that they all had and how it was just like a small, very isolated town that of course had religion, and they lived off the land. Now when it comes to the castle, the castle has a lot of BS in it. The castle looks amazing, but there's a lot of BS and fluff in the castle in my opinion. There's a lot of parts that I don't like about the castle. The cart ride, you can miss me with that. The cart ride was very boring, I will say that. I do not like the cart ride. I do not like the giant ass robot that you have to do. That is a very annoying area. I don't know why they included this in the game. I was like, I do not like that at all. It was kind of just felt like fluff. It was like, dog, we did not need this giant ass robot, and it's just like a whole bunch of just fighting enemies and fighting enemies, because that's honestly what the castle feels like. Where like the village, you had a little bit of time where you could explore stuff. Yes, you had enemies that showed up, but in the castle I just feel like it's non-stop fighting and other BS shenanigans that happen. You do have like cool stuff that does happen in the castle. Like, of course, like you get a free rocket launcher. That's pretty cool. You have the one boss fight with the one creature, the Verdugo. You do have that boss fight. That's a really interesting boss fight. I do like that. But you just have a lot of BS here. Like, you have the one lava area that just feels so out of place, and it's just like, dog, why is this in this castle? Like, why do you have this random ass lava area with these like stone dragons and shit? That was very out of place. And of course, like, you have the whole Gatling gun thing where the dude just randomly hops on the Gatling gun. That shit was just like, why? So it just feels like a lot of fluff and just like, here, fight all these different enemies while you're in this castle before you finally get to the end of the castle. And that's why that area I kind of just don't rock with. But I mean, it fixed the game because this game is just like a fast-paced action game. It's action horror because you have some areas that actually add some horror in it, but for the most part, it's just an action horror game. But to me, the castle kind of does just feel like there's way too many goddamn annoying enemies, and that's how I feel about the castle. But I mean, in general, because like after the castle, you're gonna go to the island. The island has some annoying shit too, but I just feel like the castle has more stuff that just feels out of place, that is just like, dog, why is this in this castle? Because the castle just feels like a mystery bag. I can't lie, because it's like, dog, what room am I going to go in next that you have? There are a lot of really cool areas like the water room, even though, you know, the water room, you know, that's the notorious room that sometimes can make or break you, because sometimes you can die in there a lot because of how many enemies you have. And of course, you have to protect Ashley, so that's annoying. But you also do have the area where you get to travel as Ashley by herself, and you get to control Ashley, and that's a pretty cool part of the castle. I do like that one. I do like exploring the castle like by yourself as Leon. That works really well instead of like having Ashley with you. Ashley you always do got to worry about, but also Ashley can help you. But in the one area you can find one of the magnums in, that's where you need Ashley, that you got to lift her up that she can unlock the door. So there's little perks like that. Yes, you do have a lot of story elements that do take place in the castle. That's when Leon and Ada finally meet, and that's when you also have Louise end up dying. So there's a lot of cool moments that do happen in the castle, but at the same time there is a lot of fluff. So when it comes to the island, this is the weakest point of the game, because it really is just when the action is like ramped up all the way, because this is the final part of the game. It's just like, dog, you're just going through killing enemies. Yes, you're gonna have some story elements. Yes, you're gonna have Leon and Krauser reuniting with each other, but at the same time the island just kind of goes very, very fast, and you just get done with the island so fast, because once you take out Krauser, you're basically about to go rescue Ashley, and then you rescue Ashley, and then you're at the end of the game. But like, it's kind of weak because it's just like a whole bunch of annoying enemies, and of course you have like little areas where you have to kill all these goddamn enemies just to open some of these certain doors, and sometimes it can become repetitive and very annoying. But there are funny moments in here, like when you have Ashley driving that one truck and all that. Yes, it is kind of out of place, but at the same time it's just like all you got to do is just shoot the enemies off, but it's not really nothing special. To me, it's more just like something they kind of just threw in the game just to fluff it out, to make it more longer. It's just like, you didn't really need it in the game like that, because to me it was not really needed. But of course, the best part of the island are the regenerators, because this actually adds horror to the game. It's something that's very shocking, because like, you're not expecting this enemy like this, especially because like throughout the game we haven't had enemies that can regenerate, but then we get introduced to the regenerators and just like, oh shit, this enemy can regenerate. Now I want to talk about the boss fights of this game. Now the first boss fight you really have is the Chainsaw Man, but it's not really like a boss fight. It's kind of just like a sub boss, because it's something you just have to take out, that way the bell can ring. So like, it's not really nothing crazy, and he's not really that hard of an enemy. Now when it comes to the Del Lago boss fight, this is a pretty cool boss fight because you're fighting a giant salamander, but at the same time it can be annoying. You got to make sure you're throwing the spears at it, and you got to make sure you don't fall off the ship. But overall, I actually do enjoy this one, and it's not that bad. Yes, it is kind of a more boring boss fight, but at the same time I do like the giant ass salamander. I thought that was cool. The Chief Mendez boss fight, I like it because I do like his transformation. He has a really cool transformation, but like his boss fight can actually, you can get it done really fast. Like if you throw grenades at him, especially the flame grenades, you can take him out really, really fast. Like, it's not that hard of a boss fight, but I do like his design. His whole overall design is really dope, and I do like that. Now when it comes to the Verdugo boss fight, this is probably the best boss fight in the game, and it's the one I like the most. Because like, once he's kind of like an invincible enemy, unless you throw the liquid nitrogen on him, then like he's not invincible, and you just got to shoot him. And like, that's one of the challenges of this, is you have to shoot him when you throw the nitrogen on him, that way he will freeze. And like, if you don't do that, he's essentially invincible. So like, it's a really cool boss fight, and I really like this one a lot. Now when it comes to the Salazar boss fight, most of the time when it comes to this boss fight, I don't like dealing with him. I just get the rocket launcher and I shoot his ass. But like, his boss fight isn't that bad. You know, you just got to shoot the eye a few times, you know, next thing you know, it opens up and then it reveals him. But like, I don't really like dealing with his boss fight. He's one of the few boss fights I always get the rocket launcher for, because I don't feel like dealing with his shit. But it's a okay boss fight, but at the same time it can be annoying. Now when it comes to the U3 boss fight, I do not like this boss fight at all, because the whole setup to it is kind of so random, because I don't even know how Leon even ends up in that cage. Like, the whole way the cutscene plays out is so weird. But like, you're doing this whole thing where you have to make sure you can open these doors and get out of there, that way you can get out of that cage. And then his boss fight in general, It's just like you have him going underground attacking you. To me, it's just annoying, and honestly, this is a boss fight they kind of could have cut out the game. I don't really enjoy the U3 boss fight at all. Now the 2 Krauser boss fights. Now the first one is just a whole bunch of quick time events, and you just got to make sure you're clicking the right buttons. I low-key wish this would have been something we could have played out. That's why in the remake they did that, but besides that, it's an okay boss fight. And then like when it comes to his second boss fight, this one can be kind of annoying because you have him running around hitting you and hiding and all that, and then you have to shoot him a few times, or you have to use the knife, and usually the knife is the better thing to do because like the knife does way more damage. But overall, his boss fight isn't that bad, especially the second one. I do enjoy the second one because you have a lot of different areas that you go to when it comes to his fight. Now when it comes to the Saddler fight, this one has a lot of cool things you can do, and you can use the crane. You can knock objects into him, and that way you can get him away from you like whenever he comes too close. But most of the time, all you gotta do is just shoot him in the eye with the Magnum or any other weapons you have until you get to the point where Ada throws the rocket launcher at you, and then you kill him. But overall, I do like his boss fight. But the boss fights in this game overall aren't that bad, and I enjoy almost all of them. I think U3 is the only one I really don't like, and the Salazar boss fight is one I kind of just like, I don't feel like dealing with whenever I get there, especially because like how much you have to do in the castle, because you have to do so much shit in the castle. And I think by the time I get there, I'm usually just tired of just fighting these enemies. I'm just like, dog, I want to move on to the island. And that's usually why I use the rocket launcher for him. And also like one of the best things this game added was like you can buy the rocket launcher from the merchant. So it's like you don't really got to deal with any of these boss fights if you don't want to. And especially like in the castle, they give you a free rocket launcher, and you can decide if you want to use it on the Verdugo or if you want to use it on Salazar. And there's one boss fight I forgot to talk about, and that is like when it comes to the 1 Giants. When you have to fight them, their boss fights aren't that bad, especially the first one. I really like that one a lot because you have the dog that helps you, and then like the second time you fight him, you know, you have that one that's in like in the 2 paths in the village, and then you have the ones in the castle that are like in that lava room, but you know you can send one of them inside the lava, which is really cool. I do like that whole mechanic, how you can send one of them inside the lava. But those ones are really not that bad. You just got to light them up like with the TMP, and most of the time all you got to do is just run up to them, and then you just knife like their parasite, and you can take them out pretty easily like that. But yeah, I really do enjoy the boss fights in this game a lot. Now when it comes to the replayability of this game does have a lot of replayability because of course you get outfits, but also you have the one outfit that Ashley gets, which is like the whole like knight in shining armor type of outfit, and that's essentially makes her invincible, especially if you want to play like on the hardest difficulty. And you have like different weapons you can unlock, especially if you're playing mercenaries. You can unlock the hand cannon, or if you're in the regular playthrough, you can buy the Chicago typewriter, or you can buy the infinite rocket launcher. But just know both of those cost over $1 million. So yeah, you got to save up your money, and you got to make sure you're getting all the jewels and like stack your money up, and like make sure you have all your weapons upgraded already. That way you can unlock all these different items. And of course, if you play on professional, you get like the one laser gun. I forgot exactly what you call that one, but you unlock that one. So yeah, there's a lot of unlockables and a lot of just replayability that's in this game. Now let's talk about Separate Ways, because I feel a certain way about Separate Ways, because one, I really enjoy playing as Ada, but on the other hand, a lot of this just feels like it kind of wasn't needed, and it kind of just feels like a whole bunch of here, just play as Ada as you're going through the same areas you already went through with Leon. Like that's kind of how it feels. And it's like even the new areas we get in this game are annoying. Like the shipyard area, why was that included in this game? That is some of the worst shit I've ever played in a video game when it comes to that shipyard area. All the other areas with Ada that we can play as Ada, because I mean everybody loves Ada, and like this is the first game where we actually got to play like a full like little playthrough for Ada, because you know in RE2 it was just a short little section, where in this one we actually got like a full playthrough for Ada, and she gets her own weapons. The only thing that sucks is that we can't upgrade our weapons, so it's like there's no reason ever to really play Separate Ways more than one time, because the second playthrough of Separate Ways is kind of boring, because you don't even get to upgrade your weapons. You don't get no new weapons, of course, besides like the Chicago typewriter and all that, but it's just kind of boring. And it's like the other thing is you have to play Assignment Ada, and Assignment Ada is not that bad. It's actually a fun little mode that you could play as Ada, but you have to finish that game. That way you can unlock the Chicago typewriter, and that's like the only other thing you can do in Separate Ways, and it comes with just like things you can buy like in the second playthrough. So like it's not really worth it. Even when it comes to some of the new cutscenes we get in this mode, sadly, for some reason, Capcom never updated them, and they still look like the way they looked on the PS2, and they look very bad. And it's just like, dog, why were they never updated like the rest of the game? Like, it was a kind of weird decision. But overall, Separate Ways, it's cool playing as Ada, but at the same time, it kind of feels like they could have done a better job with Separate Ways, because all it feels like is like, oh, let me just go through these areas that Leon went through. Now, one of the best things about Separate Ways is after you beat it, you have a fire song that comes on that is a banger, and in my opinion, it's one of the best things about Separate Ways is that song that plays after you beat it. It is so good. Some of the cool things about Separate Ways is that you're going to these areas before Leon does. You have the first mission where you go to the church first, because Ada's the one that rings rings the bell to like to stop the villagers from attacking Leon. So you have stuff like that, or you have like areas where like Ada just happens to put like a certain like treasure in an item that Leon goes to pick up later. So you have little things like that, but at the same time there's just a lot of just like kind of fluff and annoying things that happen in separate ways, and it kind of doesn't really feel that special because it just feels like it's just an extension of just like, oh, let's go through more areas that Leon went through and have to deal with more enemies just like Leon had to, and it just doesn't really feel that special. If they would have included like more new areas, it would have made separate ways way funner than what it actually is, but we're just going through the same areas as Leon. I mean, but to be fair, they are in the same location, so it makes sense they would go through some of the same areas, but that's why, you know, in the remake they improved that so much when it comes to separate ways. Separate ways in the remake is so much better, but the original one, it's kind of meh. I could kind of live without the original one. It's cool playing as Ada, but I mean, I could always go to assignment Ada, which to me is way cooler. And of course, like the assignment Ada outfit looks way better than the outfit Ada wears in the game. Just saying though, I do love the assignment Ada outfit a lot. But just separate ways, to me, it was a cool idea, but to me, it was executed horribly. Overall, Resident Evil 4 is one of the best games that's in the franchise, and it's also one of the most important games in the franchise, besides, of course, the first game. Resident Evil 4 had a big impact on the gaming industry with the over-the-shoulder camera that it introduced in this game, because so many games after this, they ended up taking that and the way the shooting was in Resident Evil 4 and they added it to their own games. Without Resident Evil 4, we would have not got a lot of the games that came after it, especially like with the style RE4 was. We probably would have not got a lot of games because Resident Evil 4 was like the first one to revolutionize that style. Resident Evil 4 may not be my personal favorite Resident Evil game, but I know there's a lot of people that this is their favorite game. This is the game that they love. This is their favorite game in the franchise because the combat in this game is very fun and the gameplay loop is very addicting. But overall, let me know how you feel about RE4. Is this one of your favorite games? Is this a game you really like a lot? Have you played this game a lot? Let me know, where do you rank this when you compare to like all the RE games? Do you think this is number 1, number 2, number 3? But just let me know in the comments because I'm curious how other people feel about Resident Evil 4. But just know the next time you guys might see me, just know there might be a plane crash that happens and it causes us to be stuck between some ice.
How the hell did it get down here?